and we just talked about World War One, and there was so many consequences coming out of World War One that we're going to see the modern 20th century. We're going to see the 20th century really just explode with so many significant events. And so we talked a little bit about how the Ottoman Empire falls as a consequence of taking sides with Germany in World War One. And so a new Middle East is formed, carved up by Britain and France. And another event that is so pivotal. I mean, if you remember us talking about the French Revolution in that video where that guy was like, if there's one historic event that we could really say was like super huge influence on the world, the French Revolution is one of them. And the American War for Independence, the American Revolution, an inspiration to many people around the world. But the Russian Revolution, we're used to looking at this in the context of the Cold War, that an evil project was designed, and that we think about Stalin and we think about all of the gulags. And I'm certainly not going to say those things didn't exist, but I think if you don't understand the context of the Russian Revolution and the things that, the elements to it that drew so many people into an admiration and obsession with this revolution. And right now, we're just going to kind of go over several elements that's going to come out of it in Russia. So, but things were going on there before World War One, and we're talking about 1905 to 1918. So let's take a look. So first of all, Russia in the early 1900s had rapid population growth, and rapid population growth create a certain amount of problems, right, in terms of like food, land allotments, and so forth. And then you also had a rising nationalism among non-Russian nationalities. I mean, now we know this because there's so many that broke off from Russia, but it's easy to see how Britain was a colonizer of other nations because it was a small island that then expanded and dominated like places like India and Africa, which is so strange when you think about this tiny island and these people that dominating these huge land masses. And so things look odd. You can tell something's a little amiss, when you see the white guy with a mustache that looks a lot like his right here, ruling over people, dark-skinned people in India. But we don't actually sometimes realize that Russia and China, as another example, have had more or less like, they've been colonizers, but like kind of within their geographic range, so that when we talk about Russia often in the past, or later maybe the Soviet Union or China, you simply think China, Russia. But there's these Georgians and Ukrainians and other groups of people, Chechens, that are living there that may claim that they don't want to be under the dominance of Russians, and they don't want to take on the banner of being Russia. Okay. There was also a slowness to industrialize in Russia in the middle of all this, and Tsar Nicholas II opposed reforms to limitations of his powers. So you got kind of these things brewing, some toxic brew going on, okay? Now, Sergei Witta, Minister of Finance from 1892 to 1903, what did he try to do? He did try to promote industrialization through government action, and he set up a Trans-Siberian Railroad line. What was negative about it is that he destabilized Russia, and he uprooted peasants into crowded urban slums. And, this is very common to see, right? When we look at the idea of industrialization, while it's seen by so many of us as such a significant event, it is brutal. It's always been brutal in whichever country, because it uproots people, it creates a lot of urban poverty in the middle of creating wealth, and it's not clear necessarily that there's going to be any large middle class coming out of it. So these are just certain things to think about. So I'm going to stop here, and then we're going to move on to kind of like emerging revolutionaries. Okay, so we'll go back to that in the next in the next lecture.